morning, and welcome to everybody. It's great to see so many people here already. I'm sure there'll be a few that will continue to come as we start today. So I want to welcome you all to our third webinar out of 6. And what we're doing is we're taking you through the GMC application for your CESR application. So through all of those 52 sections on the GMC divider pack. So I'm Helen. I'm an emergency medicine registrar in Oxford, and today we've got with us my colleague Priya Marathe, who is part of this CESR pathway project with me. Morning, Priya.
Hi, hello everyone.
And in a moment I'll organise our speakers as well. So just to orientate you, so I know some of you have been at our previous 2 webinars. Just to orientate you, I just want to show you exactly what we're going to be going through today. So can I share my screen, Priya, as well?
Yes.
Perfect. Da, da, da. Perfect. All right. So these are the topics we're going to be covering. Lovely. So we're going to be going, and I'll show you where these topics come from in a second. So we're going to be going from patient lists down through departmental trust workload stats, rotas, timetables, job plans, courses relevant to curriculum, portfolio, employment letters, contracts of employment, job descriptions and job plans, research-based stuff, so papers, grants, patent designs. That sounds very fancy, doesn't it? And then any kind of publications or presentations within your field. So that's what we're going to be going through. And oops, excuse me. And just to give you a quick show, so this is our Oxford Emergency Medicine website, and this is the CESR page. And if you just have a look down here, and if you look actually under the...
We can still see your PowerPoint presentation.
Ah, okay. Ah. Thanks. Okay, so and I'm just going to show you. Here we go. How's that? So can you see that? So that's the Oxford Emergency Medicine website, and this is under the CESR page. There you go, CESR page there. And what we're going to have a look at is the GMC divider pack. So it's just here under the document downloads. So this is essentially what you're going to be basing your application around for those who haven't started yet. And there are, I think, 52. I'm just not going to go through all of those, but those are all the things that you will need to cover in your application. And if we just go back, go. We're going to be basing this around the Can you see that one? Specialty specific guidance, Priya?
I can see you now.
Okay.
Oh, we could see the website, and everyone knows where to go from the website to the specialty specific guidance and what we are going to talk about today.
Yeah, so this is a specialty specific guidance. So essentially this is a document that goes through everything we're going to be talking about as well today. So that's all good. Okay, so without further ado, I'd also like to introduce 2 of our speakers today. So we've got Simon. Would you like to pop your camera on and introduce yourself?
Hello, Simon Smith. By day, I'm an A&E consultant in Oxford, And by night, one of my other roles is I'm on the CESR subcommittee at the college.
Thanks so much, Simon. Thank you for coming as well. And Alex as well, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi there, yeah, my name. Sorry guys, I made the mistake of trying to open my computer at the same time. So yeah, I'm Alex Novak. I'm one of the consultants in Oxford, and also a former CESR, I guess we say, former CESR product myself.
Thanks, Alex. We might have a couple of others joining us at a later stage when they can, and I'll introduce them when they arrive. Okay, so hand over to Priya. Do you want to introduce the first topic and get our discussion going?
Yes, so welcome everyone. We have 21 participants, including speakers today. So thank you for coming bright and early. We've got a lot to cover today, and it's going to be the mid-section of your CESR portfolio. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is patient lists. And there are quite a few questions about patient lists. And so essentially the college, I believe, wants to see how many patients we have seen in which area of our experience in emergency medicine. And they would like to see only two things: the age and the sex of the patient. All other details need to be anonymized. They would also like to see a range of diagnoses that we have seen. And I find that it's good to divide them up depending on area of where I have seen the patient. So if you have an electronic patient record in your hospital, then it's probably easy to divide the number of patients you have seen into categories, which is, these are the patients I've seen over the last 5 years in resus. These are the patients I've seen in majors, peds, minors, ambulatory. It could be done that way. Or you could organize them year-wise to show how many patients you've seen per year. A summary section is always good to say, in this year, I have seen these many patients in these many areas of the department. So you could, with electronic patient record, it's easy to find out how many patients we have seen in which area of the department. And then I had made a sort of table with area on the left side, and then number of patients seen in each zone of the department per year. And of course, they need to be anonymized. Simon, do you have to add anything to that?
No, not really. I think we discussed this sort of previously earlier on, in that there's a sort of overlap between the logbook and the patient list. And what you're trying to demonstrate with the combination of the two is that you're seeing both the breadth and number of patients, but also you're seeing them in a good quality. And most EPRs, if you've got an EPR, can fairly easily generate a list with your diagnosis, person diagnosis and disposal, etc., which gives a good idea of generically what you're seeing. But you usually want to break it down, as you say, into areas of the department to make it clear, your minors versus your ambulatory versus your resus, etc. I think that the difficulty we have with our EPR is senior reviews. You might need a technical person to get you those out, because there's a lot of senior review work, which is what you'll do at a higher level of training, at SD 5 and 6 level, which is unnoticed otherwise. And actually, that's quite high level stuff you're doing there, because there's an amount of entrustment you're doing with the juniors, and so that is quite important. You get that out as well, and demonstrate that.
Question, Simon. Well, two questions. Firstly, the specialty specific guidance says that they want to see your numbers in the previous year before you submit your application. So it's just that 12-month period, is it?
That is the minimum requirement, and that's what the assessors will make you put in anyway. But actually, most people go back about 3 years.
Okay.
Just for the numbers game. You don't have to. A year will do, but most people go a bit further back than that.
I understand.
You might need to, if you're part-time, to bulk up the numbers, as it were, because as I said before, the expectation is that you will see, as a full-time equivalent, we can discuss what that means, between 800 and 1,200 patients per year as the primary doctor, as a trainee. So around about 1,000 roughly. Obviously, if you're less than full-time, you have to pro-rata that down. So you might have to bulk up to show that you're seeing the breadth of patients you've seen, the number of kids you need to see and stuff.
That's useful, thanks. Thanks for putting that in, Priya. The other question was, we've always got an electronic system, but my understanding is not every trust has that. And I'm just thinking, there are quite a lot of people here from all different trusts and different countries even potentially. What do you do if you don't have an electronic record?
Then it becomes slightly tricky because it will require a lot of searching around in the archives, paper-wise, to dig stuff out you've seen. So I have
gathering prospectively.
Yeah. Well, that's always a good idea, but yeah, not everybody does that.
Yeah. So so you could even just keep perhaps like a Microsoft spreadsheet with an MRN, and an age and a presenting feature.
Yeah.
And I guess and if anybody desperately needed to, they can cross-check things so that they know you're not making up patients.
Yes, but we would never do that, really.
Yeah.
We assess the evidence you submit, and we trust that you are being honest with that. And the verifiers sign for it as well. So the verifiers are telling GMC they trust it. So that check and balance to stop people making stuff up.
Yeah. I'm just thinking questions in the chat. So Martha says, if I'm changing trust, how will I gather this evidence and the data of all the patients I've seen in previous hospitals?
In that case, you have to phone a friend. Now, there are GDPR rules to think about here. So they can't send you any stuff for patient data anyway, so they would have to do the anonymization process. They have to be a good friend. Most departments will do it for you if you ask them nicely, provided you left them in good standing, as it were. But it is a bit of an effort on their behalf as well as yours. And maybe a box of chocolates might smooth things over.
Thanks, Simon. Are there any more questions from the floor?
So we're discussing section 20 from the GMC divider pack.
Can I just jump in with one point about the last?
Yes, Alex. Absolutely.
It's just from experience having done it. Mine was on paper. It's just be prepared for a lot of anonymization and invest in if you're doing it on paper, a big thick black marker pen. And sometimes that's not enough. And when it photocopies and scans, sometimes it shows through. So it's just I think the official, I got told to do Tipex and the black marker. This sounds trivial, but actually, if you've got thousands of patients to do, it's quite a lot of time. So just factor that in. Sorry, just a small point, but.
No, it does take quite a lot of time. I remember when I had to do mine, and I submitted 5 years worth of patient lists. And it took me almost good part of 2-3 weeks every evening sitting down to black mark it all out. There is a clever way of doing it if you have EPR in the hospital. And like Simon says, you have to find one person at the EPR house, and you can say, I work in this hospital, these are my records, this is my employee number, please can I have the information about what I have seen, and can you pull out the information for me, please? And the second time when I required some more information, when I asked them for it, like Simon says, I needed to get information for the senior reviews. I just asked them and I said, when you give me the information in an Excel sheet, please could you remove all patient identifying information? So they removed all of the MRN numbers, and they basically gave me time of attendance to ED, age, gender or sex, and diagnosis, discharge diagnosis. That's it. I had 4 columns and it was very neat, and I didn't have to anonymize anything. So if that is possible at your hospital, then do that. But do it early, because if you can't do it, then like Alex said, you need weeks and weeks to sit and anonymize it. And if you are using a black marker pen, I used one that writes on any material. So I went to the craft shop and bought one that writes on wood, glass, paper, metal. And then that worked finally to remove everything when I was anonymizing, because like Alice said, if they are scanning it, then the light can sometimes peek through. If you've simply used a like a sketch pen, it shines through the light, because they're going to scan everything in, and you don't want that. You want it absolutely gone. Or they will send all your evidence back. If it's not anonymized, they will send everything back and reject that piece of evidence. So anonymization, very important.
We've all got commenters like a black crayon works well. I guess black crayon, it's kind of waxy, isn't it? So perhaps that also means you don't get the light shining through. So maybe have a try with a couple of things, see what works best. Another question, and again, it's about the detail. And I think Bilal, the message is probably you don't need that level of detail. So Bilal is asking, one consultant she knows, you used a pivot table. I don't know what a pivot table is, but I guess it's something that shows something more detail. And they've showed the exact breadth of the curriculum, and they've demonstrated the number of patients per curriculum code. It doesn't, Simon, from what you're saying, it doesn't seem that that's necessary, is that?
Somebody's showing off the Excel spreadsheet skills to a high level degree there. It would be excellent. I've never seen it in an application. It would, I suppose, demonstrate easily to the assessor that you've covered everything. But I've never seen it before. So I think that's if you do it, if you've got the IT skills and you like doing that sort of thing, fine, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Thanks. Shall we move on? If anyone has any further questions, we can always add them in. So we're going to move on to the second topic from today, which is the departmental or trust workload stats, or the annual caseload stats. So perhaps if we can just have a brief summary of what that actually means, Simon or Alex.
Well, that's actually probably one of the easiest things to do. It is just a one-pager of how big your department is, mainly so they can sort of get some idea of where you've been working, whether it's a small unit on the Outer Hebrides that sees 3 patients a day, or a major trauma centre. And that is all it is there for. It also provides some proof that you've actually done some work and actually have been somewhere. So it triangulates with your job plans and stuff. But essentially, it's how big the hospitals are and what sort of caseload you could think about. So I suspect where it is slightly more detail might be required is if you worked overseas, because the structures will be different, the patient demographic will be different, and the clinical work is different. So you might want to put a bit more of a narrative there, but not, not much. Keep it to one page. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't got much to add to that. Actually, it wasn't a challenging bit of the process, and you might find, I mean, I don't think this counts as plagiarism, but you might find if someone submitted the CESR recently, they'll have all the stats. So I think that's what happened to me. Someone had a page with all that, because it isn't information about you; it's about the institution anyway.
So may I add what was in my piece of letter? And like Alex said, it was the same that you submitted, Alex, and I just took it off you, I think. So it was basically, this is my department, this is where it is, this is the level of hospital I work in. So I work in a major trauma center, which has a pediatric emergency medicine, separated pediatric emergency medicine department. I have a resus, which has these many beds. I have majors, which has these many beds. I have minors, which has this number of patients. And in a day, we see these many number of patients. In a month, I might see these many patients. In a year, this is what happens. And the range of patients that we see are, from minor injuries to resuscitation. And this is my hospital, and we have so many specialties, or only these specialties. So you have to describe your department and give statistics and numbers. That was what I wrote in my submission under this section. Yeah.
Thanks, Priya. So if we move on to the next topic, before we do that, I just want to say hello to Dion. Dion is one of our joining consultants. Do you want to just briefly introduce yourself, Dion? Thanks for coming.
Have you unmuted me? Yes, you have. I'm Dion. I'm one of the consultants at the ED in the JR. I came to the UK more than 10 years ago, probably. So I have I had the fortune of being familiar with how to keep records and where to get them from, and that's really it. It's useful to find somebody in your department who's done this, particularly if you look at sort of using the technology to do it. Some of it I had to figure out, like, because everything is online now. My advice from Alex and Priya was, take a crayon and spend hours. I think Alex said sit in front of the telly, watch something interesting, and just do that.
And with a glass of wine.
With a glass of wine. But there are ways to do it, and it's useful to find somebody who's done it. And I had to figure out how to download the PDF document and then edit PDF documents by doing it in an easy way, which makes it from maybe 3 weeks to 3 hours or a day or so, and you can do that. And again, some of it you just need to figure out what the records department can provide you with, and they'll come back. And you just need to think about what Simon and Priya said. You just need to think about everything you do, because I think people often forget stuff like senior reviews if you're doing that role for a while. And I think, my biggest advice, we can, I'll chip in as there's detail, but I think some of the best advice I got was to think of every section, even that, what is that, department trust workload bit, which, as Simon said, is very simple, but to think of every section in two ways. It's either or showing the quantity of what you see and or the quality of what you do. And if you think of how the trust workload might do that, then yes, that's going to show a little bit of the quantity, because your trust is maybe a big trust, and then it has to be sort of assumed in a way. I think under that it might say percentage of work you undertake, but I don't think that can be shown. You have to just do the bits that are possible. And then in terms of the quality, you want to show just a range. So it's useful to sort of show, well, our ED has obviously a pediatric ED, for example, or we've got a the sort of nature of your ED. Again, I don't know how much this is. I mean, I also copied from Priya, who copied from Alex, who copied from James Ray, who copied from, you know, so you kind of take advice where it comes from. We did, and there's a point where you put in too much, I think. So I think somewhere I saw that, you know, there's a description of how big Oxfordshire is and what's our demographic in our region. I guess you can do that. That doesn't really tell me anything about what quality or quantity of work you're doing. So, but yeah, I think that's a pretty good, simple way of thinking when you're pulling something together and how to present it. Don't, you know, if you show annual stats, just think about how it's going to tell the reviewer one of those things. And in terms of the question that somebody asked about the pivot table, yeah, there's one other bit of advice, and I think Simon can probably substantiate what I say. The easier you make it for the reviewer, the happier they might be in a way. If they have to go and dig through loads and volumes of narrative to find the information, then it's not, it can be annoying, I imagine. However, remember what you are submitting in terms of keeping it as simple enough for somebody to navigate through it, and also not shooting yourself in the foot and making it so detailed that it becomes subsections of subsections. You still need to stick with what the SSG said. And the other thing, of course, is when Priya and Helen asked me to sort of say something here, I thought what I'm going to do is do a share screen of the SSG, and if anybody hadn't read it, send them away to read it about 50 times, because that's what you need to do. You need to familiarize yourself with that document and really be clear about what's in there. Those are my sort of things that I learned over the time.
Thanks, Dion. Your golden nuggets, and I think that's the beauty of having people who've gone through that experience themselves, you know, being here and talking, because that's exactly the kinds of thing that people need to hear. So there's specific guidance. So that's that document I had up on the screen earlier, and there's a link to that on the Oxford Emergency Medicine website from the CESR page. And yeah, totally agree, Dion. That's exactly what people need to be doing. Thank you. So we're going to move on to the next topic, which is rotas, timetables and job plans, which again I think might be a relatively straightforward one. So Simon, are you happy just to run through what would be expected with that section?
Yes, as an assessor, this is often the most tedious section, because job plans all look the same, don't they? They're all fairly similar. So it is exactly what it says, a summary. You don't need to put all your rotas for 6 years in, okay? A summary of the rota for each job, okay? And you need to put, for each job, you need to put all the things in. Rota / timetables, very much the same thing for ED. A job plan, which is usually fairly standard and generic and part of the contract. It is useful to triangulate this with your CV, so that your CV at the beginning has a sort of a paragraph for each job as to what you actually did, as well as what you learned in that, to help us sort of prove it. And additionally, as we said, we need to have sort of stats and casebook evidence for it, so we can look, oh, you spent time in that job, and oh, that was what that job looked like. So it's just basically giving a feel for what you actually did. But it is actually fairly easy, because you've got contracts with job plans in, you've all got timetables in one form or another for most jobs, and you're just putting those in. But it's useful just to think about, as Dion said, about why you're putting it in. So you're trying to demonstrate that you've done a program of work. And like most sections, if you want to really make it easy for the assessor, a sort of a one-pager at the beginning telling us what you've put in and why you put it in there, what it shows, really saves us a lot of time trawling through stuff. So sort of explain your thinking and explain what is in this section with a sort of short word document at the beginning, saying, you know, what I've got in here is these things, and what it demonstrates is this. See also the caseload list, for example. that's how I would suggest sort of making it very easy. You've got to put it in there because the GMC advisors will insist that you put it in there, and we'll send you back for copies. But make it a bit more interesting and think about why it's there. Is that sort of clear? I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything.
Just one thing I wanted to add from the specialty specific guidance. It does also mention non-clinical roles. So I think that's maybe an important thing to, you were talking about, Simon, putting things in and showing what does it demonstrate. Actually, we all take on non-clinical roles within our department, and adding some of those things in there, which will tick all sorts of boxes, non-clinical boxes, which show your competence, is also important, is my understanding.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And lots of them you don't realise you're doing because they're sort of roles you get sort of stick to you as you go through. And there are lots of little things that you do which you think are just part of the job, but actually it's quite interesting because not everyone will have it. I'm not just talking, the usual non-clinical stuff like audit and stuff like that is fine, but sort of more roles, responsibilities. So, being a lead for an area, major incident or something like that, is actually quite a, it may not be a massive amount of work, but it is a position of responsibility and is interesting, as you say, ticks an awful lot of the boxes, and often those things don't have a massive amount of output in terms of papers and stuff that you can show. So it's good to highlight it and say, look, I was involved in a lot of meetings and a lot of work. Obviously you'll put it in section 2 because that's where it appears. But yeah, highlighting the other stuff you've done around it is very important.
Thanks, Simon. We've got a question from Bilal, who says, I've never been given a job plan, so should I just have an email from a consultant to demonstrate what I do?
So job plans are normally part of the contract, and sometimes there are sample job plans in the application packs which you can use, and you're also supposed to have an agreed job plan for your appraisal, although I accept all of us do. So they're the place where it may be highlighted. But yes, any evidence is good, and the consultant, one of the supervising consultants, writing a letter or an email saying this is what you were here, this is what you did, would be a surrogate. Yeah.
There's another question, a comment in regard to specialty specific guidance. Is it identical to same requirements of trainees? In other words, can we just read and stick to the trainees requirement instead? It's
not exactly the same. The requirements in terms of WBAs are different. We're talking about 2015 curriculum. There's more alignment in the 2020 curriculum, to be honest. But in terms of the old 2015 curriculum, it is slightly different. And what you have to do is think about other evidence, because the trainees actually have a formalised programme. They have an ARCP every year, which ticks them off. They have evidence they've completed every year, requirements against a checklist. So that's done every year, and so they will have they will have a full programme of their evidence they've met the correct requirements. Whereas what you're doing as a CESR applicant is try and do that prospectively. So it is slightly different, because and actually it gives you more freedom because you can use different forms of evidence. It's very precise in ARCP checklist. You have to have WAs on certain things, and it's tedious, quite frankly. Whereas when the CESR, it's far more freedom as the evidence you put in.
So a few places you could get your job plan is, one is is in the contract, which might define what a registrar does, what a senior clinical fellow does, what a fellow in a particular area of work does. So all you have to use is from the contract or the advertisement, you pick up words or sentences from there to say, this is what it was advertised and this is the job I'm doing. So you can write and frame it from there. a consultant or a supervisor or the clinical lead or departmental head writing something for you to say, this is the job this person did for this time is your second option. Third is, if you have had ARCPs and now you are a non-trainee, then use what you put in your ARCPs. If you are now a non-trainee, we have a system called SARD that we use. And the first section of that is tell us what you do at your job. So you have to write in detail what your job is. So you can pick out your job from there. SARD also has a separate section called job plan, and that you can just say that this is my job plan. So these many hours of clinical work, these many hours of non-clinical work spread out over the year. I work in an annualized rota, I work in a non-annualized rota or a rolling rota. So explaining what it is that you were doing is that's your job plan and that's your job description. So there's a few places you can get this information from. Anything to add, Dion, Alex, where you could get job plan, job description, rotas, timetables from?
I mean, job plan, what you were referring to in that first bit of the appraisal is a scope of work. And basically a scope of work is something that I've written for the last 10 years and I've passed my appraisal, so I must be hitting something right. But you write it. You essentially write a narrative of this is what I do, this is what a middle grade in my department does. We do a night, we cover nights between midnight and 8 o'clock. I'm the most senior person in the department. All of that sort of, description of what you do. And then, in terms of the rota stuff, I'm jumping around a bit. In terms of the rota stuff, find any rota. Don't just go and say, don't make the mistake of thinking this is easy. Because if it was, and you go and just pull a rota or get an email from a consultant, I don't think you're going to do that. You need to think of every other thing you've done and just bulk up that evidence of all aspects of it. So if you've done, if your name appears on a teaching rota for, September 2016, go and find that. There's a rota, there's something that shows that you've been doing some of it. It's just, triangulating evidence around the narrative that you're providing. So yeah, I mean, but a lot of the scope of a lot of the job plan. So job plan is different from scope of work, because job plan, I mean, what a job plan is something in itself. A job plan exists within your contract, and I think Tash asked, what is a different job plan different from a PDP? They're completely different structures. A job plan, for example, in a simple way, as a consultant contract job plan, is 8 DCC plus 2 SPAs, and that's a job plan. Build your skeleton around something like that, around how you think I do my job. The narrative and scope of work is a sort of a story behind what that may be entailing. And then a PDP is, I mean, it's completely different. That's sort of something you set every year, where you go next year, by next year, I want to have, I don't think you need to show PDPs. I never showed PDPs, but
there is a different section for PDPs in this
there is a section for PDPs. Yeah. You're right. So again, go and look at some of the stuff that you're already doing. So in our appraisal that Priya explained, we did scope of work, PDPs, all of that. So in many ways, I sort of just referred to those, because PDPs, you'd be hard pushed to write a PDP retrospectively, what I plan to do in 2016 by 2017, but that is what it is essentially. I mean, if you've never written a PDP, you sort of pick 4 or 5 things and you say, by next year, I want to achieve this. And, you can have examples of what that may be. But for people on this call, it might be, by next year, I want to have gathered evidence towards my CESR. You don't have to say by next year I'm going to have a CESR, because good luck, it's not going to happen in that time if you haven't started yet. But you can say, you know, I will have do the first submission. That's part of a PDP. And I mean, PDP, I mean, I don't want to make it I don't want to make it too trivial, but I once did an appraisal, and an appraiser told me, one of my first appraisals, and they said, well, I put in my PDP next year, I want to run a marathon. You know, and you can sort of argue that that's not quite professional development, but that's it. What I'm saying is think of other stuff, but keep it focused and try and, I think this bit is just about showing that you do. So the PDP bit is just about showing this is a process that you've engaged with over time. The appraisal shows that you've engaged with the process of, you know, having yourself appraised. If you've just, like I did for the first, I don't know, 5 years of the time that I worked here, just, which a lot of people do, you just go to work, you do your job as well as you can, you see as many patients as you can. You might have a long sort of patient list, but you should have at some point started engaging in the process of people, you know, of you thinking, this is what I do in my job, and see someone going, are you achieving that? And then every little bit of this evidence is a piece of the puzzle. The scope of work, the PDP, you know, all of that forms a slightly different piece of the puzzle. If a job plan is just a paragraph, is that enough? I mean, don't write a paragraph and, you know, 5 sentences. Sorry, Simon, but you have to dress it up in a way where it looks like you've done a little bit more effort to it, and you make it presentable, and you put it in a way that, and then you can strengthen that by doing the narrative around the scope of work that you're doing. But I can't stress enough what Simon said there about having that one-page thing for every bit of evidence there, and just explain the way that you're thinking. So if you, for example, write in a job plan, you know, you might write there that, you know, in that part of my role 5 years ago, I didn't have an official job plan. Here is a description of what I did in that time. And that sort of goes with, and that, again, you can triangulate with the scope of work. But more and more, there should be job plans as standard. So ask a colleague in your department, you know, what does a sort of job plan look like here? Any more questions on this section? No, Priya's hurrying us along, so I don't have any more comments.
That's great. Fantastic. If there are any more comments, if you pop them in the chat, we'll answer them later. Thanks, Dion. That's really helpful. So the next section is looking at courses relevant to the curriculum, and there is very clear guidance on the specialty-specific guidance document about exactly what that means. I might just read that out for you. So they are looking for you to have a current certification as an ATLS or European trauma course provider, current certification in APLS or the Advanced Pediatric Life Support, or the European one. Again, same for advanced life support, preferably some formal major incident training, which your hospital might organise locally for you. Level 1 ultrasounds, safeguarding level 3, and the good clinical practice course. I'm just going to put all those things into the chat. It's pretty kind of set out there. I'm not sure whether, you know, you come across any issues with people's applications not quite understanding that, but if anyone has any specific questions, that'd be
I think there's one more course that you have to show, course, or I believe it's ultrasound as well. You have to have a ultrasound course. That's, I remember doing 5 big things: trauma, pediatrics, adult life support, major incident training, and ultrasound. Those are the 5 things you must have. But there are other courses which are relevant to the curriculum that you can demonstrate. So at Oxford, we have the advanced trauma life support course that you can put in. You can do a teaching course, a simulation course, which again is relevant to the curriculum. yes, so and safeguarding, I think child safeguarding is also must have, because that's important. Alex, Simon, Dion?
Yeah, no, so that is the absolute minimum, the list you've got there. You can do more, so you can do adult level 3 safeguarding, the vulnerable balance. That is quite good, and also ticks some domain 3 boxes. But yeah, that is the minimum. You'd be surprised how many people don't achieve that, interestingly, occasionally, or let it expire inadvertently. So that's that. But you must have those. You do not pass go without those.
It's just oh, sorry.
Yeah, go on, Alex. Go on.
I was just saying, it's worth adding that you need all those to become a consultant anyway. So this is not asking anything extra of you. So yeah, just it's one of these things. Just get on and do them, really.
I've got a question about expiry dates. So at the obviously these are at the time of putting your application in, because obviously the application process can take a period of time. Presumably you would then want to, keep your skills updated anyhow. But I'm assuming, Simon, that this is at the point of time of application that these need to be current. Yeah.
There might be a now the courses are starting up again, but they had stopped and they had been suspended because of COVID. But if you can, and if you're planning to submit your CESR portfolio and application anytime, whenever you can, just book these courses up. Even showing that you have booked it and you have paid for it and you're going to do it in the future, you can put that evidence, even if you haven't done the course yet, like a refresher course, because you do run out, the course does expire. So you can put the evidence to say, I have booked it, I'm going to go for it, I have done the pre-course reading, and any other evidence you have, you can put it in. Anything to add?
That's particularly useful with the derogations we had for COVID.
Yes.
Because lots of people missed revalidation in these things. But if you've shown that you've mitigated that and you've got a course booked now where we started courses, I've seen a couple of applications recently done that. Yeah.
We've got a question from Hanny about asking, can you use these courses as evidence of competency like you would with a work-based assessment? My understanding is that you can, but Simon, if you...
Yeah. So particularly the assessed courses, you can use in your curriculum mapping exercise. So things like sedation courses and AOA courses, you can put all those in the curriculum mapping section, and the curriculum has approved clinical competencies, absolutely. And you might, what you don't want is to count things several times. You don't want to put them in loads of sections. So choose which section is going to go in, and yeah, absolutely.
Great. I think we might move on to section 24. So that's the portfolio, and then in brackets it said electronic or revalidation. That looks like potentially quite a. I wasn't quite sure when I looked at this actually, Simon. So it says, do not submit your whole portfolio. You need to separate the evidence in it and submit that under the correct headings as set out in this guidance. What is that?
Yeah, so this is one of. I'm not going to say this bit is easy, because this bit is not easy. It's the most difficult bit of this section. So what people often do is download, in the good old days, like before August, the whole NESC portfolio, if you have the RChem portfolio, and submit that as a WANA. The problem is that is very much designed for trainees who have an annual assessment and tick the box every year. So you can just go through, oh, they've done each year, tick. Whereas with a CESR, you'll be doing different things at different times. It's a bit less clear what is covering what. So specifically things you need to separate out. You need to separate out core training from equivalencies, from higher training equivalencies. Okay, and you may want to further separate the core bit in the acute medicine, as ICM bits, separate out more clearly rather than just dumping them in the hole. The higher is, and the pediatric SD3 ones also require a little bit of thought, and that's mainly the pediatric bit you need to separate out as well. Okay, so the rest of it you can all put in on one. So the other ST3 bits and the ST4 to 6 bits are fairly uniform and a continuum, and then you can put those as a oneer. Okay, but the bits you really need to take out and to really show that you've ticked those boxes are the core and the pediatric competencies, and so that requires some division and cleverness with your portfolio. I believe you still have access to NEST for another 2 or 3 months, so you can download the stuff now. They're not deleting it, but it will be accessible, I think, after 6 months. So that's a bit of a challenge. To be honest, I haven't really been familiar myself with Kaizen yet, so I don't know what the migration looks like. They're not even finished, I believe, yet. So that might be a more interesting thing in terms of how you divide that up, electronically speaking. If it's all on paper, it's relatively easy, but most of us are electronic these days, unfortunately. So yes, that is difficult. You just need to think about, but it's the core elements and the pediatric elements you really need to cut out and separate out from the other ST3 to ST6 bits. Has that sort of made that slightly clearer?
I've got a question, which is that what is it actually, what is the purpose of it, and what is it trying to demonstrate? I'm trying to kind of get my head around kind of like downloading your whole portfolio. What specifically is it about your portfolio that they're wanting to see?
So essentially, the portfolio demonstrates you've met the clinical elements of the curriculum, and also actually some of the non-clinical elements. Because the management bit covers the management section. So that's what you're trying to demonstrate. It's pure and simple. You've met all the curriculum requirements.
Okay.
For the higher trading is fairly easy because it's a block of 3 and a bit years worth.
Yeah.
The bit you need to demonstrate is that you tick the boxes at core level at some point in the past, and that's the bit you need to separate out to show that you did what a trainee would have done in some form or another for the specifically acute medicine, anesthetics, ICM, and pediatrics.
Mm.
It's demonstration that you have achieved the clinical competencies bit of the curriculum. Got it.
Yeah, over the whole, and then specifically for the core, which remember is a different level.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
It's a very basic level. Acute medicine, that is SHO level. You're not required to demonstrate that you're a level of medical registrar. It's required to demonstrate you're a level of medical SHO. And seen a bit of work after ED. You need the IAC for anesthetics as a minimum, which is, we changed its name now, hasn't it? But so you've done what was the IAC, and you've ticked the boxes for the ICM bit, which is there's some work-based assessments to show you've clinically cared for a case, plus all the technical stuff, art lines, central lines, etc. And so it can be quite difficult if you lump it all in one massive portfolio for anyone to work out what you've achieved when, which is why you separate it out, because otherwise it's nigh on impossible to work out whether you've ticked a box for a curriculum item which appear, because remember the emerging medicine ones appear in both core and higher. And so it can be difficult to work out which box you're ticking at which level.
Okay, I understand that. So you really want to separate out the core curriculum stuff, the pediatric stuff, and the higher trainee stuff, and then also make it clear at what point in time you've done all that as well. Okay. There's a question from Bilal, which is, and a couple of questions actually coming through. As the MRChem can be shown to demonstrate most of the core competencies, as in the exams, I imagine, Bilal, you're talking about, how much more evidence is needed in this section? And the logbook will be separate and can also mention procedures and patient seen, etc. So I guess the question is, there's a sort of overlap. Therefore, how do you know how much you need to put into your portfolio?
So the short answer is the MRChem is very good evidence you've been assessed and you reached a standard, but it's not a portfolio item. Well, you can put it in a portfolio, and you can map it to curriculum competencies, but it's not a portfolio item. Okay, as it were. Portfolio is essentially all the evidence you have, other than exams, of how well you're doing. So primarily WBAs, but it's not only WBAs. It is courses, again, as we've discussed. It's reflective practice. It's all of those elements. If you go on to, it's Kaiser now, but the old NESC portfolio, all those things you could fill in to map the curriculum, it's those elements is your portfolio. So there is a minimum requirement in the SSG for these bits, and also, so for the higher bit, there's a curriculum mapping bit in the SSG, which is very, well, not the SSG, it's mentioned in the SSG, which is very useful to do. For the core, you have to, I'm afraid, reference the trainees curriculum, which is actually not that onerous. I think it's a total of six WBAs, 2 in acute medicine, 2 in emergency medicine, 2 in ICM, and there's a few other competencies that you can look up. So that's kind of how you do that.
Thanks, Simon. I just wanted to also let people know, if you prefer to put your hand up and ask your question verbally, please feel free to. I understand sometimes it's quite tricky to get your question across in the chat function, and if we haven't adequately interpreted what you've said, please do feel free to put your hand up and ask the question in person as well.
There's another question. Is there any more to the portfolio than workplace-based assessments and links to the curriculum and competencies? Also courses. So
that was my reply. So I think Simon sort of
right.
did a bit of, yeah, I think Simon sort of addressed that. So Samuel, are you happy that that's been addressed, or if you wanted to just kind of ask in more detail, please do. But I think the idea is that what Simon just said, that, you know, work-based assessments, links to the curriculum, and then also other things that you can put onto your e-portfolio that show that you know, have covered bits of the curriculum, are also part of your portfolio.
Mm-hmm. Alex, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't think so. A lot covered on that already, isn't there?
Yeah. Okay. Helen, should we move on?
Yeah, so the next section is 25, and that's employment letters and contracts of employment. Again, this looks quite straightforward. Don't know if there's any sort of hidden tricks with your letters of employment or contracts of employment, or anything people struggle with.
My advice would be to ask HR, because often people don't have these to hand. Trawl your emails if you can find them easily, and if not, just ask HR for them.
Yes, there should be. So I had letters to say, yes, you've been given a job at the John Radcliffe Hospital. This is your starting date. And so I put that letter in. Yes, that's all I think I put in that particular section. Contracts, I think I had to put in a separate contract when I moved to the consultant one. So I put that one. So the job contracts were different. Anything else, Simon?
No, it's reasonable.
Straightforward.
It's just proof that you have done what you said you have, really.
Yeah.
So it's part of the triangulation. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm just going to go back to one question we've had, just briefly back to the previous point, which is from Bilal, which says that she feels that the specialty-specific guidance is very clear about the work-based assessments with respect to the high specialty training, but not to the core training. Simon, I don't know if you can shed any light on that.
I agree. So it is exactly, and yeah, as I said, you have to go and look at the curriculum itself, and the schedule of assessments that is in there, in one of the appendices of the old curriculum. You have to dig up the old curriculum. It is not very much. So there is a requirement for the core, the big ones, major presentations, for, so I think 6 WBAs, can be DEXs or CBDs. is the requirement. And then there is a number, I can't remember, for the acute presentations that aren't the major presentations, so the other 30 odd. But it's not a particularly massive number. And actually you can map it with other stuff as well. I think the key bit is for acute medicine, because actually the emergency medicine stuff, a training has to do as they go through, but actually you're working at a higher level. So that's kind of covered the fact you've done it. Yeah, you've done all these things again or prove them as a higher trainee. It's the acute medicine which is a bit unclear. Because the anesthetic is very clear, you need the IAC, and that's it really. The ICM is reasonably clear. You need those procedures ticked off as DOPS, plus a couple of CBDs or many cases that you've managed a critically unwell patient. But again, lots of that you will do again as a higher trainee, because you will look after critically ill patients in resus, so you can prove you still have those skills, and your DOPS and an RSI and a central line can be achieved later on to, show you stuff currency in those. It's the acute medicine bit, showing that at some point you've looked after patients beyond the 4-hour mark, is the bit, and we've kind of discussed it in the first seminar. It's quite difficult. So go back to the original curriculum. For the acute medicine, there are 2 major presentations must be covered in acute medicine, and then a small smattering of WBAs. But actually, most of this will be logbook stuff, I think, and reflections, rather than WBAs.
Bilal's also suggested, so would perhaps 2 ACATs with an acute medicine consultant, be enough? Because obviously with an ACAT you can cover lots of different presentations.
Yeah, I think an ACAT would be a brilliant idea.
Excellent.
Because it shows that you've done an acute take essentially, and you have looked after them after they've been extruded from the EB.
Brilliant, thanks. Any more questions on that? Okay, so we're going to move on. So the next one I've got here is job descriptions and job plans, but we have actually covered that earlier, haven't we? So I'm going to skip through that. And the next bit we're going to come to is the sort of the research bit of the portfolio, of the application, sorry. And the first section is going to be research papers, grants, and patent designs.
Alex?
Yeah, well, we've all got loads of those, haven't we? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say this is often the thinner bit of the application for lots of people. We, all of us at early stages with getting involved in research. I mean, I think again that's an expanding thing in emergency medicine. There's lots of opportunities. There's lots of sort of simple things you can do to sort of section up. Good clinical practice is a really easy one. It's an online learning module. Teach about the principles of research. We're aiming to get everybody, at least in our department, sort of positive in this, so to allow them to recruit patients into studies anyway. I think most emergency departments now have some kind of research going, even if it's just delivering sort of NIHR big clinical trials, or sending in data for sort of COVID research. And this so I mean, getting involved in that kind of thing, and there's usually certificates available for that kind of project that you can sort of send in, and all this sort of stuff. And I think there's a section later on of sort of presentations and post submissions, but I mean, obviously any sort of projects you do that are leading up to things like that would count here, I think. Just in terms of opportunities and stuff, we're always interested in Oxford and helping people out. We've got a really active research department, and depending on where you're listening in from, you'll probably have a teaching hospital or other hospital where you've got a research active officer. Just get in contact. I can guarantee you that whoever's running the research stuff, they will be looking for people to help and looking for people to get involved. So if you haven't already, I would definitely put in an advert. I should declare a bias on the research lead for Oxford, so this is why I'm skewed in this way. But other than that, again, it's much the same principle as everything else in CESR, in thinking laterally about what you're up to and all the ways in which you might have gone to a research seminar or been involved in these sorts of ways and finding evidence in inverted commas to support that.
So Alex, why am I echoing? Alex, so if let's say I don't have a research paper that I have my name on, or I don't have a grant that I have my name on, or a patent design, which I definitely don't have, what should I put in this section? So you suggested a certificate for the good clinical practice course.
So that's
and
easy.
That's easy. And then you suggested if I've been to a training module for a particular research study that is ongoing in my department, I can say I went to that training. What else?
So So these are all terms that I think will become more familiar to people as we get through. And I think it was worth as a backdrop to this. Research is one of these sort of it's supposed to be part of our practice for all of us, actually, in some form or other, either supporting it or doing it. So again, this is one of the things where CESR is kind of helping prepare you for being a consultant as well, for being a senior and taking that responsibility. So although everyone's heart sinks when they see the research, it doesn't mean you have to be this kind of professor of statistics and an expert in all these things. It's about just showing, can you engage and support that part of that really important part of our sort of identity and practice. So think about it in those terms. And in the main for most people, by the way, I didn't have any papers or grants at that stage. That I do now, but when I went through CESR, I didn't, certainly. So that won't stop you at all. So the GCP course is an easy one. Getting on the delegate log, which is a term that probably won't be familiar to most people. That means basically that you've been through a training for a trial. So most people have heard of like the crash trials, or there's Cryostat, which is a big trauma one. There's also various sort of COVID trials that were going on. Falcon is one you might have seen, that was all over the country. So getting on the delegate log, which basically just means you've gone to your local research team, which is usually like nurse-led, but probably will have a consultant attached as a minimum, and gone through probably a training video or spent time, and then become eligible to recruit for that trial. And actually, we, again, in our department, we're about to do a big recruitment drive to try and get people on that. It's very minimal effort for you as an individual, actually. But what it does do is it means that when there's a patient around, you're able to recruit them. And usually that would come with a certificate, or you can even just an email from a consultant to say that you're now on the delegate log. Thanks for taking the training. That would support it. And, a few of those would help tremendously. Attending research seminars, I think would also be relevant as well. I'll defer to Simon a little bit on the detail of whether these count, but I would think, if you're going to the annual scientific conference and you're attending seminars on a particular research project, just document that as well.
The other thing that he mentions is critical appraisal. So if you do anything with regard to critical appraisal, whether you've got your critical appraisal exam, or whether you're going to journal club, presenting at journal club, or just being a participant at journal club, all of that I think is included. And I think, like you're saying, Alex, just showing that you are taking an interest and getting involved with kind of research at some level, it sounds like that is enough. There's a comment from Bella which is asking, so she's got the clinical practice course, which she's going to include, but she says otherwise going to keep this section blank and not include a divider. I mean, my feeling is maybe there ought to be a divider there to show that you've not missed it out. Simon, what would you say in response to that, but also just in response to what Alex has also mentioned?
So I think, I was just looking at my CV actually. When I became a consultant, I was training on a CESR applicant. I had 3 publications. Only one of those was a proper paper. The other 2 were letters and stuff like that. And since becoming a consultant, my rate of increase has been 1 every 2 years in terms of publications, plus a smattering of other minor stuff. So a blank section is not a terrible thing. When I say blank, you've got to show the minimum. So the minimum, you must have the GCP. It's in the SSG, it's a requirement. You must demonstrate that you've got skills and critical appraisal. Now, if you've done the critical appraisal bit of the exam, that is done, okay? But you need to point that out, because obviously the exam's changed over the years, and the examiner, you know, won't have to head, oh, well, they did it in 2017, so they will have the critical appraisal bit. So point it out to them. So a nice summary is a very good way of covering this. I mean, GCP certificate is here. Here it is. I did the critical appraisal. If you haven't done a critical appraisal exam, then you have to demonstrate it. So you have to put something in the section. Okay, and as you said, journal clubs, critical appraisal course, they all count. Okay, and that was in the new curriculum. So you can look at the new curriculum and see what they expect there, and that's what you're required to do. So that you can't have a blank section. You must have those two bits in it with an explanation. But actually, most of us will, you know, whether we want to or not, we'll end up recruiting people into trials over the last year. And that is, you have to be a PI or a chief investigator. Just having recruited is an absolute, you know, that is demonstration that you are functioning at level of most consultants in the UK in EM. Okay, that's all we do. Our contribution research is capped at that. Okay, we recruit patients to trials. Okay, and that's what you need to do. Okay, but that's not the essential bit. The essential bit is the GCP and critical appraisal skills. That's the academic minimum requirement in the curriculum, and that's what you need to demonstrate. Okay, after that, you're gilding the lily. Okay, and that's all good stuff. But you don't have to try and drum up a publication just for this. Okay, you don't need it. Yep. Is that sort of clear?
That's really clear.
As a comment, just generally, it's unwise to aim for the minimum in CESR applications, full stop. Like, because by the time you submit this, you kind of want to have done everything. What you don't really want to have to do is go back and then do something. You might want to have to find a bit more evidence or dig out another form or another bit of paper somewhere. But what you don't really want to have to do is then go back and do an audit or go back and actually do some stuff. So, and I think all these things, and I'd comment on the acute med. Again, I'm a bit biased with the acute med stuff, but you know, I wouldn't see it as a tick box. Like being an acute medic is that is a future direction of medicine for sure. We're drifting to cover a lot more of that kind of stuff away from the orthopedic stuff. So, like, it is worth seeing CESR as a guide to what you're going to need to be able to accommodate as a consultant as well. It's a much more positive way to engage with it, I would say.
Great. I think the next sections is section number 29, if we don't have any other questions.
I'd just like to, just for a second, say we've had somebody join us. So Tom, one of our other CESR consultants, has just joined us. I just wanted you to just pop up, say hello, and just introduce yourself for those that don't know you already before we move on.
Hi, so I'm at the JROUH, and so my particular interest or what I've been working in is being a sort of data monkey and trying to sort out measuring emergency care. So this is a bit of, so I've done some academic stuff. I'm a principal investigator in a medical device trial, looking at collecting data from devices, monitoring patients in the community. But in this context, most of what I'm doing is about understanding how emergency care works and how we should be collecting data to make it better. And so I work half-time for NHS England and half-time at OUH.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for joining. Okay, then, if there are no more questions for that particular section, for the research section, then we will move on to section number 29. And that section is publications within the specialty field. If I can remember, what did I put in this? I had a couple of online publications, which are, things I wrote, comments on conferences I'd been to. And so I had something published there, so I put those in. and I didn't quite have a lot to put in this section, but that's all I had put in. Alex, did you have a? You must have had a few things to put in.
At that stage, actually, I don't think I did. Yeah. No, presentations, which is the next section, and yeah, those are easier to come by, but yeah.
Yeah. So publications, so journal publications, online publications, those can go in this section.
I've forgotten, there was a best bet.
There was a best bet.
Because we all did our CTR at that stage, didn't we? And so, yeah, everyone sort of converted that into a best bet, which is sort of a line in a on a website somewhere, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, it's those kind of things.
Yeah.
I've got a question. What about, you know, so if you have a publication, you know, in you know, but it's not necessarily a researchy, sciencey thing, but it's something that related to medicine and health. So I sometimes write articles for medically related magazines, for example. That sort of thing. Is that countable?
In my understanding,
I should think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't lose anything by putting these things in. Would be the other point, is if you've got something good. I mean, there are so many different ways to be published or to have an article on it. So I mean, I think if you've got something you think might be relevant, my sense would be just to put it in. I mean, people can tell you to take it out.
Yeah, Simon's nodding. I see that as a good sign. I guess it's a demonstration that you are, you know, doing stuff and writing, and, you know, whatever, whether it's an opinion piece or whether it's a, you know, kind of evidence-based journal, you know, there's value in it. And I guess that's what the panel are looking for. Is that right, Simon?
Absolutely. So, yeah, no, like any evidence that's we're not, as I said, when I got the result, I had one peer review publication, a couple of letters, and that was it. And I've not moved on massively since then. So so you don't have to overproduce in this area. I say this is a generic form covering academics and, you know, hematologists who publish on a daily basis, you know. And when I appraise academics, I'm always slightly embarrassed when I look at their list. They say, I've only done 20 publications this year. You know, I do one every 2 years if I'm lucky. Don't be shy about not having too much in the publication section. Anything anything counts. Yeah.
Tom has put in a comment, and which is very, very good. I forgot about it. Posters are quite good because they are easy to get into conferences and they can be referenced. And especially now that so many conferences are online, and you do get an acknowledgement from the conference organizers saying, yes, we have accepted your poster. And you can put that letter in as well. And sometimes it remains on the website of the conference, so you can reference it very easily and put a link to your poster or the poster packet as such. So that's a good idea. Thanks, Tom.
On the conference as well, people tend to underestimate how easy it is to get posters in conferences. And if I can put a plug in for the OSEM conference, which is in December this year, we'd love to have your posters and your presence. So yeah, come along and do get involved.
Yes, so OSEM is Oxford School of EM, and we would love to have your poster if you need something to put into your CESR portfolio. Great. There's a, oh yes, Tom, thanks again. So register with ORCID, am I saying that right? ORCID, as this keeps track of your work in this area. And Tom has helpfully kindly put the link to it. So you can create a account for yourself, and then everything is in there. And then the summary printout can be taken from your account. It's great. But you don't have to have things under this section. None at all. I mean, the research one, we had to have the GCP course and the critical appraisal course if you had, but under publications, it's all right if you don't have anything. It's completely all right. Okay. So if there aren't any questions, then should we move on to our last section for the day, which is presentations and poster presentations. So that is section number 30 for today. And I think we've covered the poster presentations, which can go into this. Presentations. So I'll start if that's okay, Helen. Presentations is, it's helpful to divide up your presentations on what level you have done them. Presentation means you are taking a topic from the curriculum, or which is of relevance to the specialty, and you are presenting it to an audience. And it's helpful to organize it according to the level. So departmental, regional, national, international, if you have it in that order, and then it's neatly summarized. And what I had done was I had put the title and where I presented it, how many people were there, and what was it about? Was it in a meeting? Was it online? Or was it a face-to-face conference? And how many people were in the room listening to me? So that's how I had created the section. I had also printed out, I think, 4 slides on each A4 paper of my slides, the PowerPoint slides, so they could see what I had spoken about. So for example, if you taught medical students about transient loss of consciousness as a topic, then I had printed out my 20 slides and put that presentation as evidence that, yes, I did this. And then because I had done that presentation about 4 times over 4 years, I'd put in the dates of when I had done that presentation. So yes, attach evidence to the presentation. Tom, do you want to add anything?
No, I just put something in the chat is that when you do these presentations, then quite often, particularly in conferences, then you'll get some collated feedback from the audience members, and that's quite good evidence. And you can always do a bit of reflecting, because we all like a bit of reflection, don't we? Say, well, this is what I learned from this, and so because we have to do this for our appraisals and for our it's part of the evidence that we submit sort of further down the track. So it's a good habit to get into, is that I just have a file where I collect those sort of things for the appraisals and revalidation.
Thanks, Tom. Can I just ask, just to clarify that this section, it seems as though it's covering 2 sort of slightly different things, which is, firstly, are you able to present? So from a sort of physical perspective, and the other thing is kind of your involvement in showcasing things that you have done. Is that right, Simon?
Yes, so you can, and it also can link to curriculum items as well. It is evidence that you teach about head injuries, although we really separate teaching presentations in a second. You're teaching about a subject, it matches to a curriculum item, possibly. So you're allowed to link that way. So yes, so this can look very much like your teaching and training section with, some primary evidence. They have primary evidence to GMC. The assessors aren't so bothered about it, but, primary evidence is your presentation. I have done it, and this is how good it is. Can you show us how good it is? And then how it's received is also primary evidence. How everyone thought about it is primary evidence. So immediate feedback. Okay, it's not quite the same as teaching and training. You do the same thing in teaching and training, and you reflect on it as well, as Tom suggested, in teaching and training section. But this isn't just your teaching, this is presentations. So you're going to be clear that it's a different thing. So it tends to be slightly more academic than the teaching. Sometimes they look very similar. But there has to be some sort of nugget makes it slightly different to presentation. So, for example, presentation of governance would be a presentation, I suppose. Presentation of an audit is a presentation. But I say conference presentations are the pinnacle of this section. Yeah.
Thanks, Simon, for clarifying that. Do we have any questions? More questions from participants? One new question down here. So Samuel has said, Samuel has used paper forms for work-based place assessments when working overseas. And I get the feeling that going forward, an electronic portfolio would probably make the CESR process easier. So this is a more general question. Is there a recommended platform for this? And the RChem platform, or is that less good for non-trainees? Simon, there's been a bit of a change recently, hasn't there?
So the RChem platform moved, well, it still is migrating, quite frankly, as always with IT things, there's been a few hitches. So technically from August, everyone moved, trainees and non-trainees alike, from the old NESC platform to the Kaizen platform. And I'd always recommend the RChem platform, whichever it is. Okay, now you can't access the NESC, it has to be Kaizen. The only problem is that if you are submitting in the next, and before next August, and you choose to submit against 2015 curriculum, which I would generally recommend because we're all familiar with it and it's easier, and clearer, then I'm not sure how well the Kaizen platform works for that, because it is very much completely mapped to the new curriculum. So there's a bit of a discussion to be had if you're submitting the next year on the 2015 curriculum. But going forward, if you're planning, if you're starting out and planning going forward, I'd recommend Kaizen, simply because it is so well mapped to the curriculum, it saves you all that thinking process, and also deals with all the issues we've talked about already about separating out core, and that's all managed in the curriculum. So it is, and they have put some thought into how CESR candidates will use the new platform. So I would always recommend that as the platform going forward. There was a question I did notice we haven't quite answered from Hanny about mapping stuff to linking stuff in the curriculum, which is mainly relates to the old platform and the old curriculum, but it does, I suppose, link to the new curriculum as well. So I think the question is how many times can you link one piece of evidence? Under the old curriculum, there wasn't a limit, okay, but it was generally bad form. Obviously, it has to be relevant. You can't just link things because it vaguely sounds like it might be relevant. It has to be, when you drill out into the form, it has to mention the bits of the curriculum that you're linking it to. But it was generally considered bad form to link to really more than 3, absolutely. And ideally, that would be a mixture of core competencies and especially specific competencies, usually one especially specific and one core competency, two core competencies would be the breakdown. And I would, if you're doing more than that, unless it's an ACAT or an ESLI, I would suggest that you're probably overlinking. The new curriculum is slightly different because it is the 12 SLOs. So that's a slightly different discussion and slightly more nuanced. But they are talking about having in each SLO a minimum of 4 pieces of evidence. That's sort of the talk that's coming out, of which ideally one is a WBA. That's kind of what they're talking about, but that's a discussion for another day. I hope that's answered everyone's questions.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, Helen, that sort of brings us to the end of our sections that we are discussing today. We've gone through 11 sections, from patient lists to presentations and poster presentations. Yes, thanks for showing that to us again.
That's what we've
covered today. A big section of the GMC divider pack And today was our third of 6 episodes of this particular CESR webinar series. So we are going to do one next month, and we will advertise the date on various social media forums very shortly. Helen?
Yeah, I just want to say massive thanks to all of our speakers, Simon, Tom, Dion, Alex, obviously, who's had to leave a bit early. Thank you to Priya. Can I thank myself? I guess I probably can.
I'll thank you. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you very much for speakers, because I appreciate, you know, this is a bit of your free time every month. And it's massively appreciated, because I think there's no substitute for the experience of people who have been through the process or who are actually involved in the process, because sometimes, as we can see, it's, you know, deciphering exactly what is meant with words is not always easy, especially for people who, you know, are not in a clinical environment where they have people like you guys around them to be able to help. I'd really like to say, I'd love to see people's faces. If people want to kind of, you know, switch their cameras on and say hello, and
wave to everyone.
You know, and if you're shy and you don't want to, that's fine as well. Hi, Abby.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, we would love to see everyone. If you can switch on your videos for a second.
Hey there. And I think, you know, so we are going to be planning to do 3 more webinars, 1 a month. And if anybody has any feedback, we're always happy to get feedback. If anybody on this forum is not on our WhatsApp group, please feel free to join. You can also contact us via the Oxford Emergency Medicine website, the CESR page. There's a contact form. If you want to get in touch, please do, with any feedback about previous stuff we've done, or about stuff you'd like to see going forwards, or any other questions you have. Any last words from people?
I'd say, looking at the faces now, certainly from our department, the ones I know, stop doing this and go and get some evidence.
Now that you know what to get, yes, go and start collecting your evidence. And if you have any questions,
don't procrastinate. It seems like a process that's very painful. I'm not going to say it's not, but don't procrastinate. Just get on and do it. And I would be getting very nervous if I heard Simon just there saying, try and get it done before the 2015 curriculum. So get it done.
Get it done. Yeah, it's one piece of evidence every day. Think about it at every shift. Think about it every day. And come and visit our website, because we've got lots of helpful links. And please tell your colleagues about our webinars, and come and attend. Ask your questions, give us your comments. And if you want to reach out, you can do so via the email section on the website. So either Helen or I will pick up the email, and we can send you answers if you need them. Thank you again for joining us, and thanks to all our speakers. Thank you, Helen.